Hey y'all, it's Your Name, and today we're diving headfirst into a drama unfolding across the pond. It's a story of political turmoil, economic uncertainty, and a continent grappling with its place on the world stage. That's right, we're talking about the European Union, and honey, let me tell you, things ain't looking too pretty. From the bustling streets of Paris to the industrial heartland of Germany, a sense of unease hangs heavy in the air. The European project, once a beacon of unity and prosperity, is facing its most serious challenges yet. And at the heart of this storm stands one woman, Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the European Commission. But this isn't just about one person. It's about a system, a structure, that many say is failing to address the very real concerns of everyday Europeans. From soaring energy prices to a growing sense of unease over immigration, the pressure is mounting on those in power to deliver. So buckle up, folks, because we're about to unravel a tale of political intrigue, economic uncertainty, and a continent at a crossroads. Get ready for a wild ride as we explore the EU leadership drama and what it means for the future of Europe. Now, Ursula von der Leyen, she's a figure who inspires strong opinions, to say the least. Some see her as a capable leader trying to navigate a perfect storm of challenges. Others, well, they see her as the captain of a ship heading straight for an iceberg, and they're not afraid to say it loud and clear. You see, von der Leyen has become the lightning rod for a whole host of grievances, from the controversial Green Deal to the EU's handling of the migrant crisis. Her critics, and honey, there are a lot of them, argue that her policies are out of touch with the needs of ordinary Europeans, that they're more concerned with appeasing Brussels bureaucrats than addressing the real-world problems facing real people. And these criticisms are coming from all sides, mind you. We're talking seasoned politicians, academics, even folks just trying to make ends meet. They're pointing fingers at her leadership, at the EU's bureaucratic structure, at what they see as a growing disconnect between the people in power and the people they're supposed to represent. Now, to be fair, von der Leyen is facing a set of challenges that would test even the most seasoned politician. But the question remains, is she the right person to steer the EU ship through these turbulent waters? Or are her policies and leadership style only adding fuel to the fire? This isn't just some political drama playing out in the halls of power, y'all. This is about the future of Europe, about the very soul of a continent that's been shaped by centuries of conflict, cooperation, and the relentless pursuit of unity. And the stakes, honey, they couldn't be higher. Because if the EU unravels, if it succumbs to the centrifugal forces of nationalism, populism, and economic instability, the consequences will be felt far beyond its borders. We're talking about a potential return to the kind of divisions and rivalries that plunged Europe into darkness, not once but twice in the 20th century. And let's be clear, the challenges facing the EU are not going away anytime soon. The war in Ukraine, the energy crisis, the rise of China, these are all tectonic shifts in the global landscape that demand a strong, united, and decisive Europe. The question is, can the EU rise to the challenge? Can it overcome its internal divisions, its bureaucratic inertia, and its crisis of leadership to forge a new path forward? Or will it stumble and fall, a cautionary tale of a noble experiment that lost its way? Now let's talk about this Green Deal, because, honey, it's causing quite a stir. Von der Leyen has staked her reputation on this ambitious plan to make Europe the world's first climate-neutral continent by 2050. Sounds great on paper, right? Well, not so fast, say her critics. They argue that the Green Deal is a classic case of champagne socialism, a bunch of out-of-touch elites imposing their green fantasies on hard-working folks who are struggling to put food on the table. They point to soaring energy prices, job losses in traditional industries, and a mountain of regulations that they say are strangling businesses. And it's not just the usual suspects on the right who are crying foul. Even some on the left are starting to question whether the Green Deal is going too far, too fast, without enough consideration for the social and economic costs. They worry that the push for a greener Europe is coming at the expense of jobs, affordability, and social cohesion. Now, von der Leyen, she insists that the Green Deal is not just about saving the planet. It's about creating jobs, boosting innovation, and securing Europe's economic future. But try telling that to the factory worker who just lost his job because his plant couldn't afford to comply with the latest emissions standards. Or the single mother who's struggling to heat her home because of sky-high energy bills. And then there's the whole issue of migration, a topic that's as complex as it is contentious. Von der Leyen has made it clear that she wants a more humane and coordinated approach to migration, one that shares the responsibility among EU member states. But her critics argue that her migration pact is nothing more than a recipe for open borders and a loss of national sovereignty. They point to the influx of migrants and refugees into Europe in recent years, which has strained social services, fueled cultural anxieties, and given rise to populist movements across the continent. They argue that von der Leyen's policies are only making matters worse, that they're encouraging more people to make the dangerous journey to Europe, and that they're failing to address the root causes of migration. And let's be real, y'all, this issue of migration is deeply personal for millions of Europeans. It touches on questions of identity, security, and the very fabric of their societies. It's not something that can be easily resolved with quotas and bureaucratic pronouncements. Von der Leyen, she argues that Europe has a moral obligation to help those fleeing war and persecution, and that a coordinated approach is the only way to manage migration effectively. But her critics counter that charity begins at home, and that the EU needs to focus on securing its own borders and addressing the concerns of its own citizens before it can even think about helping others. Now, you might be thinking, well, bless her heart. At least von der Leyen is trying to do something about these challenges. And that's true, she is. But here's the thing that's really got folks riled up. They feel like their voices aren't being heard. They see a European Union that's become increasingly distant, bureaucratic, and out of touch with the concerns of ordinary people. They see decisions being made in Brussels by unelected officials who are more interested in advancing their own careers than in serving the needs of their constituents. And they're tired of it, y'all. They're tired of being ignored, dismissed, and talked down to. They want a European Union that listens to them, that respects their values, and that reflects their priorities. They want a Europe that works for them, not against them. But instead, they see a European Union that's more interested in lecturing them about climate change, diversity, and the evils of nationalism. They see a Europe that's quick to condemn its own member states for not being progressive enough, while turning a blind eye to the challenges they face. So here we are, y'all, at a crossroads. The European Union, once a symbol of hope and unity, is facing a crisis of confidence. Its citizens are disillusioned, its leaders are divided, and its future is uncertain. The question is, what happens next? Will the European Union heed the warnings of its critics and chart a new course? Will it find a way to bridge the gap between its lofty ideals and the everyday realities of its citizens? Or will it continue down the same path, further alienating its own people and risking its own demise? The stakes couldn't be higher. The world is watching, and the future of Europe hangs in the balance. Let's talk about the EU's democratic deficit, a major source of frustration. The EU is a unique hybrid of nation-state and international organization. Balancing unity and diversity is tough. Critics say it's too bureaucratic and disconnected from citizens. Decisions often happen behind closed doors, influenced by lobbyists. Even prominent politicians are concerned. They call for more transparency and citizen involvement. The EU has made some attempts to address these issues. The European Parliament is directly elected, but many believe more fundamental reforms are needed. Bureaucracy is like that distant cousin you avoid at family reunions, the one who drones on and sucks the fun out of the room. Some argue the EU is too chummy with bureaucracy. Mountains of regulations, endless directives, and labyrinthine processes stifle innovation. It's enough to make anyone scream. Critics say this mindset pervades the EU, creating risk aversion and conformity. Has the EU's bureaucracy become too bloated? Now, it's one thing for ordinary folks to grumble about the EU, but when prominent politicians start publicly criticizing the very institution they're a part of, well, that's when you know things are getting real. And lately, honey, there's been a whole chorus of dissent coming from the halls of power across Europe. We're talking about seasoned leaders, respected figures who've spent years working within the EU system, suddenly speaking out against what they see as its failings. They're raising concerns about the erosion of national sovereignty, the lack of democratic accountability, and the growing disconnect between the EU's elites and the people they're supposed to represent. Take, for instance, Viktor Orban of Hungary. He's been a vocal critic of the EU's migration policies, arguing that they're undermining national identity and security. Or consider Marine Le Pen of France, who has tapped into widespread frustration with the EU's perceived elitism and lack of transparency. Now, these politicians may come from different sides of the political spectrum, but they're united in their belief that the EU needs to change. They argue that it needs to become more responsive to the needs and concerns of its citizens, more respectful of national differences, and more accountable for its actions. Section 4, The People versus the Elites, a Growing Chasm. At the heart of the EU drama lies a growing chasm between the people and the elites, those benefiting from the European project and those feeling left behind. This divide is about values, identity, and belonging. Until the EU bridges this chasm, its future remains in doubt. Germany, the economic powerhouse of Europe, is facing tough times. Soaring energy prices have hit hard, leading to production cuts and job losses. Chancellor Scholz's leadership is under scrutiny as the nation grapples with these challenges. In France, President Macron's popularity is waning amid economic struggles and social unrest. His reforms and perceived aloofness have sparked protests and discontent. Rising living costs are making people question his grand vision for France. Brexit Britain is struggling to find its footing post-EU. Economic woes, political chaos, and unfulfilled promises are causing widespread disillusionment. The Northern Ireland issue remains a significant challenge. Germany. France and Britain are all facing unique crises. The European Union's future hangs in the balance as it navigates these turbulent times. The decisions made now will shape the continent's future. The EU's Green Deal aims for climate neutrality by 2050, but at what cost? Industries worry about economic fallout, and high energy prices are hitting consumers hard. Balancing environmental goals with economic realities is a pressing challenge. Migration is testing Europe's cultural fabric and social services. Opinions are divided between welcoming refugees and concerns over national identity. This issue strikes at the heart of what it means to be European. The global balance of power is shifting, with Asia, Africa, and Latin America rising. Europe risks being left behind if it doesn't adapt to this new reality. Staying relevant requires evolution and strategic thinking. Nationalism and populism are challenging the EU's unity. Eurosceptic parties and internal tensions threaten to unravel decades of integration. The path to fragmentation could have dire consequences for Europe. Europe's relationship with America feels increasingly one-sided. Reliance on the US has led to costly conflicts and economic strain. Some argue Europe needs to assert its own interests more strongly. Europe's sovereignty is under threat from external influences and internal weaknesses. Dependence on NATO and inconsistent foreign policies are problematic. Europe's ability to chart its own course is in question. China and Russia's partnership is reshaping global dynamics. This new axis challenges Western dominance and presents a strategic dilemma for Europe. Europe must navigate this complex landscape carefully. Europe stands at a crossroads, needing to reclaim its sovereignty and leadership. The old order is fading, and Europe must forge its own path. The future of the European project depends on decisive action and vision. Section 1. The Gathering Storm, a Continent Adrift. Well, folks, there you have it. The European Union, once a shining beacon of unity and progress, is facing a whole mess of challenges, a perfect storm of economic anxieties, cultural tensions, and political uncertainties. It's enough to make your head spin, and frankly, it's got a lot of folks worried about the future. We've talked about Ursula von der Leyen, the embattled captain of the EU ship, facing criticism from all sides over her handling of everything from the Green Deal to the migration crisis. We've seen how the EU's bureaucratic machinery, once praised for its efficiency, is now seen by many as bloated, out of touch, and more interested in protecting its own power than serving the needs of the people. And let's not forget about those cracks spreading across the European map, as national interests clash with the EU's grand vision of integration. Germany's economic engine is sputtering, France is wrestling with social unrest, and Brexit Britain is still trying to find its footing in a post-EU world. It's enough to make you wonder if the whole European project is headed for a messy breakup. Adding fuel to the fire, you've got those global power shifts, with America's dominance waning, and new players like China and Russia stepping up to challenge the old order. Europe, caught in the middle, risks becoming a pawn in a bigger game, its voice drowned out, its interests sidelined. Section 2. A Glimmer of Hope. Can Europe rise to the challenge? Now, I don't want to leave y'all with nothing but doom and gloom. Despite the challenges, there's still a glimmer of hope, a flicker of that old European spirit. Europe's been at a crossroads before. It's faced down threats and emerged stronger. That resilience is still there, waiting to be unleashed. But it requires soul-searching and political courage. Europe needs leaders who listen and bridge divides. It's about rediscovering a shared purpose. Europe is more than just nations, it's an idea. So, can Europe rise to the challenge? Can it overcome its divisions and find a new path? Only time will tell, y'all. But the world is watching, and the stakes couldn't be higher.